ZombieTech. Welcome to ZombieTech, a forum for engineers, scientists, and inventors to ponder on the technologies needed to survive the inevitable zombie apocalypse.
She's Eddie.
He's Whisker.
And who do we have this week?
Well, this week we have actually a kind of double thing. First, it is our 1-year anniversary. Woohoo!
No. Really?
Yes. 52. This is episode number 52.
That's a lot of editing.
Yes. But a lot of awesome people, too, that we've gotten to meet. And you're focusing on the wrong things, Whisker.
No, cables.
And I'm really glad it's a birthday thing, because I was feeling like leftovers. But I'm really glad to be back.
Yes.
With you guys a year older.
And
wait, I haven't been introduced. Go ahead.
And to celebrate this with us is one of our favorite engineers of all times, John Cohn. He's an IBM fellow, a world traveler, survivalist, and consultant for the colony on Discovery, and many more things, and all things cool. So welcome back, John.
Yeah, the first time.
I'm so happy to be here. It feels like deja vu all over again.
It really does.
The first time we had John on was to talk about his experiences recording, being a cast member on The Colony, a TV show where they basically threw these clever people into an apocalypse situation and had them, build crazy contraptions to survive. Yep. And of course, that fits right in around here.
Yep.
But John does a whole bunch of other cool stuff too, including coming back to The Colony for season 2 as sort of an advisor.
Yes.
And we're going to do. We were thinking if season 3 is kind of a medical drama, the colonoscopy.
The colonoscopy. I like that.
Oh, had a lot of colon jokes. Yeah.
But I guess it didn't pan out, I assume. Or is it?
No. Well, that's a long story. I think what happened is, all good things, but we ended up having to eat the production crew, kind of in the second time, and so there was nothing left.
Sure.
Yeah, you know how it goes.
Sure. Well, and it's interesting because we have a couple of friends who are also who have done shows on Discovery before, and I think their general sentiment about it was that it was actually a rough, like it wasn't an ideal production situation.
Different production companies, though, between the two shows. Yeah.
Oh. I am not authorized to respond to that question. I'm sorry, my chip has been removed. Actually, I think it was really great. I think the problem is that they're trying to, it's a tough thing. You're trying to, do on a very small budget, trying to go after, Discovery's got a brand. They're trying to do science and stuff like that, but you need enough, craziness to make the reality show stuff work. And so I think it's hard. I think it's really hard. I've never seen anybody, nobody comes away from a reality show going, now that was well scripted,
True. Very true. And I was surprised when actually you had mentioned last time that the personalities were pretty much true to how they were depicted on the show. I was a little surprised because there were some nutters that you guys had.
Oh, but, well, the whole thing, it was really interesting, and being part of the production crew, actually helping with the casting of the second season, which was an interesting thing. They actually use like these weird psychological batteries, like the actually from your home state, the Minnesota multiphasic. Have you ever seen that?
No.
It's a test that they usually give to like meth heads,
oh
to
my
see
God.
if they're. It's this weird test. No, it's tough. Like, we may have talked about this last time, but I really still think about it. It had questions like, aliens control my thoughts.
Right, I did. Yes, I was just thinking there was something about aliens in this questionnaire.
I still struggle on that, because if they did, what would you say?
How would you know?
But actually, I remember the guy looking at my thing and going, "Are you sure you want to be on reality TV?" Because they actually look. There's some like weird spiky thing, spiky is some weird shape in the format of your response that makes it perfect for reality TV.
Sure.
I'd like to take the Jersey Shore guys through this and see what happens.
God.
They had very large spikes over there. I'm pretty sure mine would be the opposite of what they'd want, because I'd sit there for a week going, is it time to go home yet?
No, Whiskers, you would be perfect. You have sort of a Six Sigma personality. It'd be just perfect.
Well, if the third season ever does come up, I'd be totally interested in. I don't know if I do well, but I'd be totally interested in.
Oh, I think you guys would be awesome. You could do the sort of singing duet, as you kind of like ate one of the bad guys. It would be good. It'd be great.
The question is, then, would we be the zombies at that point in time if we're eating people?
We actually had an offer recently by a guy who's going to be running a survival school that is using zombies as their theme. It's a live action school, so they're actually going to have zombies out in the woods, and you've got to survive for like 72 hours and not get eaten by the zombies, etc. And the director, he was on the show last week, was it?
Yep.
And could have been 2 weeks ago, I forget.
I suggested a nun plant.
So he actually offered to allow us to come out and be the plants in the group.
That God kidnapped
so that we
away.
could psychologically mess with the people who are actually there. Yeah, that could be a lot of fun.
Oh, it was funny that you mentioned that, because we were talking about doing, colony camp. It would be really fun to just, parents who were, bad parents could ship their kids off here for a week, and, you would have to make do or be eaten. I think it would be great. I really like the zombie thing. Hey, I wanted to tell you something. But can I?
Yeah, go
tangent
for it.
Off for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, week before last, I was in Mexico, and I realized. So I spent a lot of time going around talking about, trying to make kids want to be engineers, and all of a sudden I realized that I was a zombie. As I was trying to get other people, it's just like zombies. Zombies, all they want is to make you like them, right?
Sure.
And I was just thinking that my whole life I've been trying to convince people to go into engineering. I'm just being a zombie. I'm being an intellectual zombie. And I felt really good about that. I actually thought about you. And I was trying to explain this in my broken Spanish to somebody. And the guy was looking at me like, what?
Why are you talking about dead people that come back to life?
What is it? Los muertos vivientes. That's what the zombies. Or zombies. Zombie actually passes in Mexico as well.
That's great.
Memetics is a very fascinating topic. How, thoughts can, good ideas can spread between people. I can go on and on about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can take the meme thing. It's a very positive thing, but I think that the zombie analogy is actually kind of nice.
Yeah. And the only difference, of course, is once you inspire somebody to be an engineer, they go on to create things that are better for life, hopefully, right? So it's not just like a dead end, if that makes sense.
Oh, I think that's just that's just perspective. I mean, it depends on where you work, but yeah,
good point.
Right. Yeah, some engineers basically get locked in a room with no windows, and they're sort of a patent machine for their company.
Very good point. So it's been since November since we've talked, and while I would love to continue talking about colony things, because I absolutely love the series, what you have been up to so many things, and I know there's like projects that you've had with the Vermont makers, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
I came back from the zombie apocalypse.
Right.
You know what? I got to tell you, a lot of zombie movies end up in Vermont. Because this whole New York thing, where are you going to go? So is it like The Stand? What are the other ones? There's been a lot of them. What was the Will Smith one? He ends up. What was that one?
I Am Legend.
Yeah.
I Am Legend. Where does he end up? Vermont. I'm just saying. This is the place where zombies want to be. God. Or we're like the zombie vacuum.
I don't know if that's a good thing though.
Well, I think it's kind of this weird thing that there's the even the guys in Maine, they write about how the zombies would go to Vermont. That's I don't know. I kind of like it. I think it's just because it's nice in the fall, and maybe were particularly tasty. I
It
think
must
so.
be.
I think it's the vegetarian diet.
It could be very healthy.
But we were talking a little bit before we were recording. I mean, Vermont has this whole, great inventor ethos that kind of, that zombies just love. It's the statistics I was rattling off because I just want to. I think this is really cool because we were. I just was researching this, and that the first patent in the United States came from Vermont, and it was for making potash for taking wood ash and for making soap. And I thought that was really cool because they actually had to make a little in the old days. You had to actually make a little model and take it down to the patent office in Washington.
Oh, okay.
First guy, and the first electric motor was made and then eventually patented by Thomas Danforth, who's in Bridgeport, Vermont, and that was a really cool story because he had traveled over, just crossed over Lake Champlain and seen an early electromagnet. This is early 19th century. He had seen somebody using an electromagnet to separate ore, and he came up with the first electric motor, commutated electric motor. And the story is he tore up his wife's wedding dress to insulate the wires, which I thought was pretty cool.
I wonder how she thought about that.
No, and I think there's this whole tradition in the 19th century. It was all tool makers and precision. There was a lot of precision, small precision machining. The patent thing really is mostly because of IBM, because we have a big, this big high tech factory, and it's about 5,000 people and only 600,000 people in the state. So it pays to be small.
Sure.
A former ZombieTech guest actually was granted a patent the other day, Joe Grand, for sort of a heat-sealed container thing that he was active as a designer on. And I was looking at the patents, and one of the uses that it lists is for sealing up containers that would include things like dirty diapers. I was like, thanks for that.
What about zombie tissue that you needed?
Yeah.
That'd be fun to list. See if you could sneak it under the radar at the patent office. See if you get any notes back.
I wonder if there are any patents. I'm gonna look up patent
zombies. They might actually appreciate that, though. They might appreciate a little bit of humor in
my experience with patent lawyers is that patent zombie.
Actually,
calls himself the patent zombie.
we asked some of our regular listeners what we should ask you, because everybody sort of absolutely fell in love with the last time you were on. They really, really liked the episode. And one of the unanimous topics that they wanted to bring up actually was patents and open source hardware specifically.
So, are patents evil? Is that the question?
Well, they just sort of wanted to know your take on the whole open source hardware thing. You work at IBM, so it's sort of, I don't know, you work at a place that sort of makes a lot of money off of owning a lot of patents. And you're also very participative in a lot of sort of cool, hip stuff where the opposite mentality is in place.
Precipitative, that sounds like something you're coming out of a solution. But actually, would it make you feel any better, Whiskers, if I told you that in my left hand, I am holding an Arduino with a as yet to be unannounced, and I should be careful about saying this, but it's a new GSM shield that the Arduino guys are putting here. And I've been working with 2 of the 4 Arduino founders trying to be an alpha tester on this thing, which is sort of working. As a matter of fact, I'll send you a SMS from it soon. But so I'm a huge believer. Let me compose my thoughts for 12 seconds. Okay, here's my position on that. So I think patents are not evil. I think actually patents help motivate people to develop. But I also am a huge believer in open. As a matter of fact, I'm running a study right now on open data. And, it's been really interesting. So I need to be a little careful how I phrase this. But you know, for a large, soul-sucking, multinational company, IBM is, I don't mean soul-sucking in a bad way. I mean in a good way.
Right.
The company really gets the notion of open, and that is a real interesting transformation. And I know this is hard to believe, and I think actually other big companies, if you look at Google or Microsoft even, not all big companies like the one we were talking about before, but I think you have to realize that there's a certain amount of, you know, what do they call it? The cognitive surplus. There's a lot of smart people in the world, and you can actually do well for your company and for your stockholders by helping these big open movements. And I mean, if you had told me, 15 years ago that IBM would be one of the, the most significant technical contributors to Linux before, I would have thought you were, on drugs or something like that. But we do a lot of work in open, and we put a lot of stuff out in open source, and we use open source very carefully. You have to be very careful about. But I think the idea is to just sort of choose where you're going to innovate and contribute to open stuff, because I think it floats all boats. So I'm a real believer that. So I think I love the open movement. I totally love the fact that between open source, the open source hardware movement, open data, that you can compose things, you can experiment, etc. I love that. I also think that there's room for commercial operators to come in and say, okay, now that the world has come up with those ideas, somebody's got to run it, and that isn't free. The labor isn't free, and so it's perfectly legitimate for somebody to come back and say, you know what, I'm going to make that really robust. I'm going to really run that for you, and I'm going to make sure that it's backed up and available 24/7. And if anything ever happens, it'll be back online in 3 minutes and all of that stuff. I'm happy to pay for that. So that's, I think, the right balance. I feel that most companies get that. I think some companies still try to play the really, the proprietary card really hard. And, like a large multinational that begins with A that makes phones and stuff like that.
And it goes down, too. It's not just the big guys that are interested in locking up their tech. I used to run a software company years and years ago, and we had some proprietary technology that we developed. And I've been through the process of using a patent attorney to do a patent search and dealing with the U.S. Patent Office and all that sort of thing. And it's completely encumbered and boring, really, and way too expensive. And it doesn't really help small business people. And big companies don't seem to mind it as much because they can afford to have an entire wing of a building devoted to dealing with that. But I mostly just found it to be rather pointless, and I like what I'm seeing these days with so many people who are taking ideas and instead of locking them up in a proprietary fashion, instead putting a license on them that defends them from being locked up by anybody so that everybody has access to it, but then still going forward in manufacturing and putting that product into the market and making money off of it. Whether or not it's locked down or not seems to have very little to do with whether or not they make money off of it. I can think of 30 projects off the top of my head that are open source hardware, and they're making good money off of building them.
That's a lot of what we do, and our philosophy has changed. So I need to be careful about talking about what I think and what I think my company thinks. But our company, for the most part, there are relatively few patents that they actually protect, that they license as individuals. I think that there's a lot of companies do cross licensing, but we use patents often just to protect our freedom of action, just exactly as you said. And what happens is, unfortunately, we were talking about patent zombies a couple of moments ago, but what the real scary thing is something called patent trolls, and that is that some company goes by and it's kind of like the equivalent of an ambulance chaser. They'll find some guy who has a legitimate patent. I think it's a good thing, but they'll buy the patent rights and then they'll go after anybody who might be infringing. And if it's a legitimate claim, then that's a great thing. But they do a lot of spurious stuff, and you end up tying a lot of time and money up.
That sort of behavior has been spilling over into the copyright side of things, which is what I have to deal with nowadays. being a content producer on YouTube, we monetize our videos by putting ads on there because, donations are great, but there's not enough of them to really cover the bills. And so when YouTube started making friends with the recording industry, the music recording industry, the movie producing industry, friends is very loosely. Basically, they were forced into bed together. They sort of came to this automatic system where the content is detected as being owned by so-and-so, and now the ads are still there. They're making revenue, but the revenue is piped over to the copyright holder.
Wow.
So, and this is all related to the DMCA and all that sort of newfangled stuff that is broken. So what people have been doing now, and I'm saying this not to give anyone ideas out there, but just to educate the public as to what's actually happening behind the scenes with the DMCA, is that there's a bunch of little companies that have started up who basically are a P.O. box and a retainer with a lawyer somewhere. And all they do all day long is file false copyright claims on YouTube so that ads are put on the video and they're paid for the ads.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a lawyer sitting there so that any of the little guys who happen to lawyer up, they can defend against you defending your thing. And one of our videos
gives me an upset tummy just thinking about it.
Just to illustrate how ridiculous this is, one of our videos got hit by one of these guys, and it was a video of us changing a bulb in our home theater projector, and they filed a copyright claim against us for that video.
How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I was upset that day.
I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, patent trolling is about the same thing. It's about the same level of human. I think we just sort of need to, I don't know, there's no really good solutions to fix these two problems.
Well, zombies. I think patent zombies. Actually, I will put in, just because I'm on the Vermont kick, I will put in a plug for our senior senator, Patrick Leahy, who is, not only has he been in the last 2 Batman movies, but he is a inveterate deadhead. He's just put some patent legislation through that is making patent trollism much harder to do. And there's some other, it's complicated law stuff, but
Patrick Leahy,
he is awesome.
He sounds very familiar.
Because he's in the Batman movies. What?
Well, I'm trying to think, was he involved in any of the, oh man. I'm trying to think, like, the most, no, it's not
yes, you're going to say it, he was. Yes. You mean the digital,
yes.
Yes, he was on the wrong side of that, I got to say.
He was on the wrong side of that, okay.
But he corrected, but he is a nice man. He really is. Yeah, that was a little weird, but he's been a great friend to intellectual property rights on both sides to try to prevent illegal stuff. Wait,
sure.
Can I deflect this and tell you a funny?
Yes, go for it.
Okay,
yes.
So last year, when my company turned 100 years old, Leahy was working on this patent legislation. So he, being in Vermont, if you wanted to come to a high-tech place, you had to come. So I had to host him for the day, and he's a great guy. But turns out, so I'm wearing a Jerry Garcia tie. I only have one tie. It's a Jerry Garcia tie. And
naturally,
he grabs my tie, and he goes, "John, is that a Jerry Garcia tie?" And he's proceeded to tell me this story about taking Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead to the Senate cafeteria. And Strom Thurmond, do you know who remember he was?
Yeah.
800 million years old.
Yeah.
And he comes over, Strom Thurmond is sitting there punching Jerry Garcia in the shoulder going, "So I hear you're a rock star." Punch. He goes, "You tell them that you met Strom Thurmond." Punch. And it's like, and as Leahy's telling me this, he's punching me in the arm really hard, and I'm going, what? He's a real sweetie.
Now, one of the big, I would say, centers of this whole opening things up movement has been the maker fairs in New York and San Francisco, and I know you were at the one in San Francisco this year, along with 15 other ZombieTech guests.
Yes.
A whole bunch of year were out there. We couldn't make it because we were there
like a month prior.
Yeah, because we were there for Parallax Robotics Expo, and that's more important than Maker Faire to us. We have a lot of friends there. Nothing personal against the makers out there. But I'm hearing rumors about Maker Faire and Vermont.
You betcha. Thank you, Whiskers. It's true. As we are, we kind of like go out. We don't get out much, but when
there's nowhere to go. It's Vermont.
Oh, we sit around, eat ice cream. What we do is we were looking at big places like the San Francisco Milpitas one and New York City one, and thinking, okay, so what do we do in a rural area? Because Vermont there's more cows than people. There's 600,000 people here. We're trying to figure out, but it's got this kind of inventor, open kind of ethos. It's a bunch of hippies that escaped New York City in the 60s and 70s. So we're doing something experimental. We have what's called the Champlain Maker Faire coming September 29th to Shelburne Museum, which is a great Americana museum up here in Shelburne, Vermont. So it's Champlain Maker Faire, FAIRE.org. And we are looking for makers, and we are looking for attendees. We've got Dean Kamen's going to fly in his helicopter. We've got some Burning Man stuff. We've got rockets and airplanes and ice cream and all sorts of crazy stuff. So we're going to see what that looks like in a rural setting. And again, Vermont's got this kind of real cool. I mean, like I said, where do people go when the zombies come? It's always Vermont. So
sure.
I heard another rumor recently. The other favorite John of ZombieTech, John S.
Oh yeah, he's
from,
also
Phoenix area down that way. They asked him to organize a mini Maker Faire for that area in Heat Sink Labs and all of that. Yeah. So
nice.
We're taking over the world one hackerspace and Maker Faire at a time.
Oh, let me tell you a magical story about that. So, I came back from Colony, the 2 seasons of the Colony, thinking, God, it's starting to really happen. The people are, it's getting to be, chic to be a geek again. And, and I thought it was really great. So about a year ago, I said, well, you know what? Vermont needs a makerspace. So long story, I started, I'm a part-time professor at the University of Vermont. They donated space to us, so we had already bought them a 3D printer. We bought a laser cutter and and some electronic gear, and we opened up this Vermont Fab Lab. And we started doing that last August. And then I got invited to be part of a makerspace at the at Essex Technical. We have a local technical high school kind of thing, and they did one. And then Champlain College opened one.
Wow.
And then so the short, by spring of this year, we had 6 springing up facilities, and just because of the way things worked out, we ended up having kind of there's a little overlap, but one's a metalworking place, one's more of a Arduino kind of cell, one's a kind of a computer hacker space, and ours is rapid prototyping. So all of a sudden, this stuff was happening, and we created this kind of umbrella organization called Vermont Makers. We've had this crazy set of meetups. So fun. Like we had Casey Reese come and talk about processing, and we've had helicopter kind of things. I'm doing a high voltage show there in October, and it's just like people coming out, and they're half artsy fartsy people and half geeks, and it's like the love child of that kind of union is just like so cool. So if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. The fact that it's in this kind of rural setting, so it's just like kind of a slice of what's going on everywhere. It's really amazing. We are taking over the world. So I would offer that we are the zombies of 21st century.
Sure. Well, zombies in a good light, actually, and
all zombies are in a good way, aren't they? Yeah. Really? Come on, Addie.
True. Yeah. Well, yeah, because they help us learn about survival techniques. And
I don't really fault people for being really hungry. I just don't.
Population control. What?
I may not go right for the brains, but
oh gosh. Actually, we have discussed this with numerous doctors who have said that it's unlikely that the zombie would be able to go to the brain, like get through the skull to the brain. So
it's the kind of stuff we talk about.
Yeah.
I think it's important. I think that we could probably do some testing.
Maybe
we could build zombie helmets. Zombie helmets,
I do not condone any tests of these theories. Just so we're clear. On your own time, John.
Another thing that Vermont has that some of your listeners probably don't have as much of is rabies. And so, zombies, rabies is like the real zombie thing. It is so cool. I have a poster that if I were able to kick this door open with my foot, we have a poster of a rabid raccoon attacking a dog. I don't know. It's been here for 30 years. It's in the inside of a closet. And I always look at that and I go, wow, that really is like being a zombie. I had a great-great-grandfather who died of rabies, which is, I guess, only kind of cool with the, with a century and a half of history to isolate for someone. I'm sure it wasn't.
I'm sure the people that knew him weren't very amused at the time.
Yeah. No, he jumped through a window, I understand, to get away from a bathtub. Isn't that weird?
Oh, that is a little weird.
Yeah, it changes your brain chemistry. I mean,
it does. Oh! I heard a partial story today. So can I tell a partially factually story? And hopefully your readers can help me.
Yeah, go for it.
Somebody at a party after too much to drink was telling me that there is a virus that lives in cats' stomachs that has manipulated the world so much that it comes out in their poop, and that mice get this somehow, and that they somehow get it. I don't know. They spread it to other cats, so the mice's brain kind of picks up on this thing, and they can't get enough of it, so that they get infected, and then other cats eat them. But the theory is that the virus gets into the brains. That do you know any cat ladies? Ladies.
Yeah.
Too many cats.
Yeah.
That the theory is that this virus gets into the brains of the cat ladies and makes them sexually attracted to the urine of cats.
Awkward.
And that's why they want to connect them. Oh,
awkward.
There's actually quite a few viruses that have complex
spreading mechanisms.
Yeah, and it makes sense because it develops over long periods of time as animals are, changing. And, if it worked, they're going to replicate more. And if the replication changed it such that they did something slightly different that worked better, it makes sense that it would come up with these absolutely ridiculous, complicated life cycles.
Be attracted to the urine.
Go
on. You want to.
Come on, you want to. It's okay. It's okay, Whiskers.
Addie and I have just started a game company with Roy Eltham, who just left Sony Online Entertainment as their head graphics guru, and who is going to work for Valve Corporation. Yep. He just actually got up there yesterday. He just moved into his apartment up at Bellevue, Roy Eltham. And the theme of our game is a pond, and you play with the DNA of all of the microorganisms in the pond by changing their environment to encourage or discourage different sorts of evolutionary behaviors. These sort of topics, like these fascinating creatures that live in cat lady brains and mouse poop, are sort of what inspired, to my brain to get interested in this sort of thing. And I think after playing with prototypes of this A-Life stuff and seeing how quickly life forms will adapt to take advantage of strange loops, I can definitely see that a virus would come up with something absolutely ridiculous like that.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't listening. I was rolling in cat urine.
Gross. That is very interesting.
Something made me do it. Gosh, I should probably look at this thing. I should look it up.
Another
now
one.
It's fact. I heard it on the radio.
Yeah.
Heard it on podcast.
It must be true.
One that I can definitely say is fact is that there's a virus that gets into the brains of ants that makes them climb to the tip of a piece of grass, bite onto it, and hang off the end, and just become frozen in time until a rabbit will come along and eat it. Yep. And then the rabbit goes elsewhere and poops, and then you know.
You know what? That explains why I keep eating those things.
Yeah.
Rabbit?
No, ants.
Off the tips of leaves.
Wait a minute.
It's all connected, man.
I don't get it. So the rabbit
I'm trying to speak Vermont here.
The rabbit eats it, then poops. What? And then the ant comes back to life, or what?
Oh, I don't remember. You'd have to look up the rest of it.
Eat shoots and leaves.
You know who we talked about this with? What's her name?
Mira Grant.
Shannon McGuire, who wrote the novels Feed. What's the other two?
Blackout and Deadline.
Yeah, they're 20 years after the zombie apocalypse, and there's some kid podcasters that are running around covering a presidential election. And the zombies are still around. Yeah, it's awesome really books. Good, she was on the show, I don't know, right around the same time that we interviewed you, actually, right around there. And we had a good long conversation with her about all of these different strange organisms that do these kinds of things. If you're interested in it, you should listen to her episode.
Yep.
Okay, I will definitely do that after I finish gorging on these ants.
So, if you guys don't already follow John Cohn's blog, you totally should, because it'll shame any of your productivity to pieces. Because, John, you pretty much are in a different part of the world every other day, it feels like.
I'll tell you what it feels like. It does feel like.
Because I think I had only been able to scroll back to April, and I thought it was much farther before that, because I was trying to read all the blog posts again from the last time that we had talked. To come up with questions, and I realized that I had only gone back a few months, and you had already been to different places in Europe.
That was Slovenia.
Yeah.
I mean, Slovenia is like it's like Narnia. It's like this weird hidden country that nobody's ever heard of, but it is so awesome. Everyone should go there. Actually, no one should go there, because I want it to be my private little place.
So why were you over there?
I can't tell you. No, why? I was giving an IBM talk, but then I got to go to the University of Ljubljana, where they're making a makerspace. It was really great.
Very nice.
And actually, we were trying to do experiments. We were putting electricity through every vegetable we could find. And they had vegetables I didn't even know. I wasn't even sure it was an animal or not. But actually, it was. They have this great makerspace that they're putting up at the university. It's great.
Sure. So what's the vibe of engineers in all of these other countries? Because you mentioned just a little earlier you went to Mexico, and I'm pretty sure in 20 hours I think it was you're going to China too.
Yeah.
So I know a part of it, most of the time it's you're there to talk and such for IBM, but what do you see people what do you see this collective energy pushing towards?
Well, you know what I think is really cool is it's there's always the cultural part of it is what is Mexican engineer, what is a Chinese engineer, but actually what I think is really interesting, it's the age thing. There's something the kind of 30 and below kind of there's a totally different the sort of online plugged in type engineer. It's so much more. I don't want to say uniform because every country's got its own character, but you kind of go to you can go be talking technically to somebody in Mexico, who's a 20-something engineer, talk to their peer in China or in India or Eastern Europe or Western Europe. It doesn't matter, and they're just as on top of what's going on. They know, You can say Arduino is the same word in every language. It's so cool, and but if you actually looked at their, the over, mid 30s and beyond, they're still very different, and they're, it's a different world. And I think actually this whole maker culture, this whole idea of it, even if it's not, you're not contributing, you're pulling in ideas from all different places, and in some ways, I think it's mostly good. I think it's almost all good. You're able to tap in. It doesn't matter. I was in Kenya the other day. Can you believe it? And you know those engineers were as tied into the stuff that was going on, you know, like on open source hardware as any place on the planet. So there's no distance and there's no time separation. But if you go into, you know, you talk to a 40-year-old engineer in any of these countries, including our own, you get a very different kind of picture of it. So they're really kind of like this digital native thing. It's almost uniform. I guess you could, you know, it'd be interesting to think about, you know, does that in some way, you know, do we lose something? Is it like the fact that you can go to Kentucky Fried Chicken all over the world? Is that good or bad? I don't know. But I think it's actually good because I think that, you know, the idea that ideas can come from anywhere and will, you know, you'll improve on them, put them back. I think that happens. But I do think it's interesting that you asked that, you guys, because I gave a couple of talks at universities in Mexico week before last, and they asked me that. They said, "What do you think about Mexican engineers?" And I was thinking, well, you know, I made this. You know, they're spicy, but you know, I think each culture has its own spin. And one of the things that really struck me about in Latin America, not just Mexico, but in Latin America, they have this human passion. They call it calor humano. You know, human heat. That really kind of their engineering. There's a humanistic passion, and the way that they go about it. You know, they're not the kind of people who are gonna, you know, work until 8 o'clock at night. They're gonna go out to a bar and have fun and continue to work. And you know, they tend to gravitate towards solutions that are emotionally you know, backed. Whereas when I know that I've traveled in the Nordics, you know, Sweden and places like that, where they tend to be very intellectual. Though they also like drinking. I think that's uniform. And I find it really interesting. So as a matter of fact, one of the things I've been talking about, my most recent kind of, you know, you get kind of like an idea stuck in your head and you just can't get it out until you tell enough people about it. And my big thing right now is on the importance of play. And how important that is to have that playful and passionate spirit, you know, in what you do, because it can't be something you do, you know, if you hate your work and then you go home and all your play is outside of your work, then your work just becomes work, which is why they call it work. But it really is important to be able to bring that. You guys are like, you know, champions at this. It's like, make your day job have some of that fun component, because it's not just so you don't hate it, it's because that's sort of your creative wellspring. So I've been taking that message. I've given that message about 4 different times, you know, to teachers and students, and I was doing this in Mexico. So I'm about to do this message to a bunch of young engineers in China, and I'm really wondering if it's going to work, because they're culturally, at least their parents' culture, there wasn't this big individual. You know, you didn't do what you wanted to do. You did what you should do.
Right.
You had to do. And well, wait, Patty, where are you from? What's your culture?
Well, Chinese.
Yeah, I mean, like second generation or first generation?
First. So parents are from, well, grandparents are from China, but because of the communist, they had to move to, like, you know, Taiwan and Vietnam. So culturally, I'm Chinese, but they were born, you know, outside
So how
the
do you
States.
think that'll work? I mean, you know, so the notion that you need to essentially fight for your right to party in an engineering sense is kind of what I'm saying.
Actually, I might be the right person to ask about this, because Addie is, you know, was raised by Chinese parents to sort of have that, you know, nose to the grindstone, straightforward, do your work, do the best you can, but you're not necessarily supposed to enjoy it. And sort of bringing that Midwest mentality of it's okay to enjoy what you do, and it's okay to take your time and do it slow and do it really well, but it's okay to have fun doing it too. Has been a challenge at times, but I think
actually that kind of goes against the Midwest ethic too, doesn't it?
It depends on the sort of Midwest community, but in the community that I'm from, you get your work done, you work hard, but you don't live to work, you work to live. It is the cliche around where I'm from. And I don't know, just sort of, I don't know if teaching is the right word, but exposing her to that way of looking at things, which is a much more what you'd expect in Latin America or something like that. You know, you need to take that hour lunch and enjoy life and talk to people, and yeah, because it's a shared experience of all people, this thing we call life. And the more dynamic we are and the more we're having fun with what we're doing, the better job we do overall.
Well, screw the having fun part. I'm saying, I'm just taking a pure capitalistic thing, is that you need to have fun because you'll have better work output, which you just basically said.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
You know, I don't care if you enjoy it. You just gotta, but I actually think that, kind of to tie this all together, of kind of like weird, you know, gene memes that sort of influence our behavior, is that actually I think this whole open source, contributory, mashup, cluster, can't say that word, collaborative innovation thing has at its core an element of fun. And, you know, you're doing stuff for street cred, you're doing stuff for fun because it's the right thing to do. And that actually fuels innovation. So my message is you need to kind of go with that or you'll be left behind. And by the way, it makes life more worth living. So that's kind of my message.
I've got an interesting addition that you might find useful as you run around the globe, sort of spreading this this whole way of looking at it. You know how the human immune system is designed such that, you know, it bumps up against infectors and it learns how to, you know, build antibodies, and they can be passed around from person to person. But if any sort of collection of organisms is too similar, there's not enough time for the immunity to be built into a system when problems arise. If it's too homogeneous, a virus will just come in and just tear through it and could potentially extinct an entire species. If we're too homogeneous in how we look at the way we innovate and how we do work, then we put ourselves in that same situation.
So you're saying like the monoculture of corn, you know, like engineered things. Yeah.
If we turn our engineers into a monoculture, we run into the same problem with good ideas. Because we're so varied and we've got this bad and good sides of globalization, one of the good sides is that you bake in the differences between local cultures into how they approach innovation and engineering. Then you have a more strengthened base of the ideas that are coming up out of that.
That reminds me of hookworms.
Of course.
That was just on the tip of my tongue.
Ooh, gross. I'm not kissing you. Actually, that was another discussion today that last night, this guy was telling me that, my friend Tim was telling me that, you know, there's a lot of thoughts that a lot of food allergies in the United States or in Western cultures are because our food supply has gotten so free of parasites that our bodies haven't seen and become used to these things. So this guy is culturing hookworms in himself and selling them.
Oh my gosh!
They tend to, you know, a lot of autoimmune things like psoriasis and stuff like that tend to be, you know, the huge rise in these autoimmune things.
You give your body something to get angry at, and it stops attacking itself.
It's exactly. It's the same
now,
reason.
With that said, last week we specifically said don't intentionally infect yourself with worms of any sort. We just said that last week, listeners, so I'm going to stick with that. Don't intentionally.
Somebody bring up hookworms?
This is ZombieTech, John.
Oh, God. God, you know, just when you think you're going to be cutting edge.
So, yeah, I mean, you got to really bring it. I mean, worms was last week. That's so last week.
I'm so sorry. But, you know, I like your analogy, this notion of a monoculture. I think that's the whole idea, because the whole thing about variety is so important.
It's strong, you know. It's on an organic level. It's strong. It's good design. If you want to think of it as designing the way in which we design, it's a good, strong design to do it that way.
But there is something that is it's something I think about a lot is the idea of the sort of lone inventor who kind of labors away on one big idea that he or she keeps very private to themselves and then hoist it on the world
Mm.
As a complete opus and he she or it becomes famous and the company becomes huge and civilization improves. It really isn't that anymore. It really is a whole bunch of it's this roiling, rapid mashup kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know that it's really ever been that. It's always been collaboration between clever people, and the guy who makes the money is usually the guy who came up with a small part of the idea, but mostly stole it from the rest of the people who collaborated, really.
Yeah, that is very, very true. If you think about some of the most iconic inventors in the world, like Edison, he was a collective, he had an industrial inventor, invention shop where he had several people looking at things and vetting ideas. I think you're right. I think that maybe the mythology of the lone inventor is kind of is the thing that's going away.
I used to be that sort of lone inventor, but we started this sort of global hacker space with toy makers, especially like in our IRC channel. And now I've sort of, I don't know, I've become wise enough to know if I get what I think of as a good idea, the first thing that I should do is mention it to all the guys in the room, in the chat room, and then they'll tell me 18 things that are wrong with it, 32 ways that I can improve it. And that's like in 30 minutes, right? And I've got a better idea than I would have come up with a year working by myself in the dark, right?
Yeah, I tell this story a lot. This is a completely revisionist, tale told backwards in a very self-serving way, but the exact same thing. When I think about, if you guys look, if you Google me, you'll see me sometimes wearing this halo of RGB lights, and you guys, I saw in your set, you're using some of these LPD 8806s or the RGB light strips.
Yep. Yep.
But the story, and again, this is a totally skewed, self-serving way of telling this, but in 2000, I don't know, 6, 7, something like that. No, it wasn't 6, 7. I found some of these lights, early versions. It was the HL1606s. When I was in Shanghai, I saw some on the building, and I went in and said must have, and found a friend, spoke Mandarin.
Mm-hmm.
I went in, bargained for it, got a price. Then this person went in and got it for a third the price. I brought a bunch of it back, and there was no documentation. And I finally found some bad documentation in Chinese. I was trying to figure this thing out, reverse engineer it. I figured about 80% of it, and I wrote some code. It was for a pick. Actually, I think I wrote the first thing. I don't know if you know what a pickaxe. It's like crazy basic, but I was trying to make them into hats, into headbands. So I made this. I figured this stuff out, and I hadn't figured out. There's a PWM feature. I hadn't really figured out how to do these smooth fades. So I did Instructables, and then I asked people, hey, I couldn't quite figure out the timing because it had this weird handshake on how the PWM stuff worked. And some guy out there, his name was Xander Hudson. He grabbed the code and he figured out that other remaining stuff. Again from no documentation. So we started exchanging that. He wrote an early Arduino sketch for that. And then I remember, because this was 2009, I was out at the Maker Faire in San Francisco, the Milpitas one, and I was wearing these lights, and somebody shouts out my name, and it was him. So we started talking about it. Anyway, he refined this this Arduino sketch, and then there were several revisions for different chipsets and stuff like that. And then Lamora Freed, Lady Ada, took some of this stuff and really did it. I don't know if you guys use her code, but her code is fantastic for the new sets. I use it for like the hula hoops I make and the lights and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that you talk about mashup culture. I was looking at the Lady Ada website. You know who she is, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah. And that she has a picture of my kid wearing my headband from the Instructables, and I went, "That's mashup."
Oh,
so here and I'm using her code which I don't think, conceptually, it doesn't have a line of code from. I'm sure it doesn't have a line of code from ours because they figured it out. But from an intellectual standpoint, from that early crufty stuff that I wrote to the much better stuff that Xander wrote, and then all these other people wrote, and then she rewrote, it's so much better. And I use that stuff now rather than the crap that I was writing because I'm not that good. I just think about this and I tell people I could never have gotten it to the point where it is now. And, and I'm sure the nice thing is, okay, so I just told a story about like how I was the center of the universe. Well, there's probably 20 other people who could tell that same story because their part is just as important.
We were beta testers for Joe Grand's EMIC2 module, which is a serial-controlled text-to-speech hardware module that can plug into microcontrollers like Arduinos. And Adafruit is, of course, is one of the distributors for it. And on the page for it, if you look in the How to Use section of it, you'll find links to tymkrs videos there.
Wait, this is on Adafruit?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So because I wrote a lot of the early demos of the module, I got it on as a beacon for ham radio. I made it sing along with an emulated SID chip song. I did a bunch of cool little hacks with it, and they're using that video as sort of a how to use this thing on the page. So I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there with similar stories how they ended up on Adafruit pages.
Well, it's not just her stuff. It's wherever you end up. I mean, that's the whole thing, is that any idea has several parents. Mm-hmm. Isn't that great?
And it's so much more efficient than if you were stuck as a distributor coming up with doing all of this background material yourself.
And it would be so much less fun for people because so few people would be able to, you'd have to do all of that infrastructure up front before you could do your creative mojo. Right?
Some people like designing things, and they're not at all interested in selling things. Some people are interested in selling things and providing that as a service for the community, and they're not so much interested in designing things. And honestly, we all have a limited amount of time in our day. So it's better to focus on the things that you really enjoy and just let other people deal with the rest of it.
Yeah.
That works.
You said, yeah.
Yep.
So, since you've been on ZombieTech, I hear that your Google searches on you have become more associated with zombies.
I'm so thankful to you for that because that is, my kids may not think that the IBM stuff is great, but when you Google zombie, I think all of your guests probably get this same treatment, but if you Google your name with the word zombie, I mean, that is instant street cred. I mean, wow.
Well, and you guys...
749,000 results with the word zombie and John Cohn. That can't be right.
Well,
how about zombie and IBM? Let's try that.
Oh, boy.
Let's try that. Let's see. If I do zombie and IBM together, do I come up? Do I?
You should, considering the tag cloud on your first episode. IBM should be in it. It should be in there somewhere. But IBM has a pretty solid search result pattern, so it may be down the results a bit.
Oh no! Look at that. I just Googled zombie IBM John Cohn, and there's a healthy number of hits, and they are.
Wow, yeah.
A lot of me. Yeah, that's good. And it's thanks to you.
and to you, because you're pretty much the awesomest of the awesomes.
There's a cute one a while back. Joe Grand, who we were just talking about, he designed that text-to-speech module. He was one of the guys who was a member of Loft. Do you remember them, John?
No.
In Boston, they were the original hackerspace with real hackers. Yes. They testified before the Senate.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. I actually, I went to dinner there. I had a friend who did inflatable sculptures near there. That was a long time ago.
Okay, so Joe's one of those guys, and he was on a Discovery show called Prototype This.
Right.
And he was on there with Zaz Brooks, who is a doctor of robotics over at MIT.
Yeah.
And so anyway, those guys have both been on the show, and they're friends of ours. So they were at DEF CON a couple weeks back, a couple months or so, and they were cruising around town hanging out, and they found the Zombie Apocalypse store. So we start getting emails of pictures of Zaz and Joe standing outside of this store looking at zombie stuff, and then sure enough, half a week later in the mail, these guys had sent via snail mail stickers and bumper stickers and all this stuff that they bought at this store while attending DEF CON, and they sent it over to Toymaker Studio here for us to stick to things. I love stuff like that. It's great.
That's great. Yeah, actually, I thought that prototype, those guys had real cred. I really liked those guys.
Yeah, it was a fun show. All right, so we're about out of time here. Is there anything that you would like to let people know about? I know we talked about the Maker Faire, mini Maker Faire that you're involved with over there. Is there anything else?
John?
I would say protect your brains. Oh, I'm just trying to think of anything that, if I were going to give wisdom. No, I think your readers already know. I mean, your listeners are the sum total of all world knowledge, so I don't think there's anything more I can impart. Gosh, I wish I could have thought of something.
Well, no, okay. If you guys haven't already, do check out his website, johncohn.org, JOHNCOHN.org. And
I do have a favor.
Yes.
Can I on a serious note?
Yes, absolutely.
So I think you guys know that our middle son passed away effectively about 6 years ago, and we make these rocks in his name, Sam. So check out samstones.org, SAMSTONES.org. We make these clay rocks, and we're trying to spread them out all over the world. So if your readers or listeners would like to help us with that, check out samstones.org, and we will send you some of those rocks. Because what I'm actually, okay.
No, go ahead.
Can I get a mulligan? Can I do a do-over when I think about it?
Of course.
Because we're always, I mean, this is a very serious topic, the loss of a loved one. But one of the things that we do is we talk about him because he was an organ donor, and I has really always looked at the opportunity to have that conversation with people that if organ donation is something that you would consider, just make sure your loved ones know that. And that's why we make these rocks, and they go all over. But we're also looking for really cool things to do with the rocks, or really cool things that people can make similar things. So we've had people shoot them up in space and put them down deep holes and throw them in volcanoes. So we're always looking put up in balloons and things like that. So we're always looking for people to do really weird things with them, or make equivalent ones. So I've made them out of chocolate and glass and stuff. But last year, since I spoke to you last, yes, I actually made a Samstone out of 33 carbon monoxide molecules. So one of the things that IBM has pioneered is atomic force microscopy. And my friend Don Eigner let me use his machine. So I took a piece of copper at just about 4 degrees Kelvin, and over a course of 3.5 hours, I'll send you that picture, was able to write Sam's name in 33 carbon monoxide molecules. So if you've got an idea of something cool that you can spell the name Sam in, I'd like to see it. And if you'd like to have one of these rocks and put it someplace in near Earth orbit or something like that, that would mean a lot to us. But more importantly, if you would be open to the idea, God forbid you ever get in a situation where you would be an organ donor, just make sure you have that conversation with your loved ones.
Absolutely.
So there you are.
Absolutely.
Yes, and of course we plan on having a Sam Stone on the shelves on the main studio set here, as we'll be switching over to video at some point once I finish building this studio up here.
I have the proverbial face made for radio, so
the Sam will be on set and visible in tens of thousands of hours of video.
Yep.
And just be a little inside thing that people will know about if they're paying attention.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you guys, I'm so impressed with all that you do to promote science and engineering. I'm just really proud of you. I'm glad to be back in the the warmed over results for the next year. No, best of luck for next year. I'm really pleased with where you guys are going.
Well, thank you, John, thank you for joining us this week. That's all the time we have. You guys can find the show every Thursday evening at ZombieTech.tv. You can get it automatically to your phone or iTunes, whatever you use, through the RSS feed available on the page. That's it for us for this week. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.